There we go, it's recording. I suppose to start off this session, maybe introduce yourself and tell us all a little bit about the work you do at DCU as the Autism Friendly Coordinator, please.
Sure. So thanks for the introduction, Michaela. My name is Fiona. I work in DCU. So around 4 years ago, DCU recognised that the numbers of autistic students coming through secondary school was greatly increasing, and therefore they also expected a rise in the number of autistic students entering university. So one of the main, I suppose, key reasons why they decided to look into what would make a higher education place autism friendly. So out of that, they did a lot of research over 2 years. They sent out a lot of surveys to autistic students and parents, asking them their thoughts on what would make their son or themselves have a fair chance at higher education. So the project, I suppose, was built around between 7 and 8 main key points of what would make it autism friendly. And my role is to project manage all of those key points, and just to make sure on a day-to-day basis that we're on track for making the university socially autism friendly, but also academically. So that's my main role at the moment in DCU.
Brilliant. And I suppose when you talk about those key points, could you tell us what some of them are? Like what do they kind of entail?
Yeah, I suppose that one of the main ones was autism awareness. So like what we're doing here this evening. So to deliver autism awareness to everyone on campus, that means whether you work in the bank or SPAR, the chemist, whether you're an academic lecturing, a professor, whether you work in student support. So just to make more and more people aware of what autism is, how it presents in students, how it might present in staff. And a major part of this awareness was, I suppose, giving a focus on communication, because autistic people tend to communicate a little bit differently than somebody without autism. And that has led to, I suppose, a lot of miscommunications. So definitely communication is one of the key points that we've found we have had to talk about to everyone in DCU. And another one key point would be the environment. So the actual campus, so what it feels like to be autistic and to be in a busy campus, a busy shop, a loud canteen, a very kind of shop space where there's lots of close proximity. So a lot of awareness around what it might feel if you are autistic and you have sensory sensitivities, because 80% of the autistic community, so autistic people, have very, very high sensory profiles. So they would feel and smell and touch things a lot deeper than somebody who isn't on the autistic spectrum.
That's, yeah, interesting. Has it led to kind of changes in the environments themselves? You know, have there been different, just out of curiosity, have there been like different types of lighting installed, or is there like quiet spaces that people can go to, or?
Yeah, exactly. Things like that. So for example, we had open day yesterday in DCU. So I think there was around 8,000 parents and children coming through the campus. So we had a quiet room, and that's just a really simple thing to do. There's no money or cost involved in that. It's simply a designated room. Probably if it's a little bit away from a busy room or loud thumping music. And the only thing that we do is we put in like comfortable chairs and pull the curtains down and make sure ahead of the event that people know where to find this room. There's no point having an escape space if when you get to the environment, you suddenly need it. So you become anxious straight away. You can't find the quiet space. So lots of signage to show people where the quiet space is. And then on a day-to-day basis, like if there's any external events like clubs and society days or like freshers days, we would have quiet times. So for example, in 12 and 2, there would be no background music, lighting may be turned down. Now we've had a lot of requests from students who work in labs. They would find the labs very noisy, and the labs just happen to be in a very old building. So it's full of concrete. So if you're an engineering student, you're working in a lab where there's like tools and equipment. So what these students were finding were that the sounds were, I suppose, being very exaggerated and echoing. So we installed acoustic panels on the wall, and made a massive difference. So while it doesn't make it soundproof, it stops the echo of all these different instruments. We would also have installed sensory pods on the campus, 3 of them. That's this, I suppose, a big capsule where you climb into. And we do a lot of school visits. A lot of kids want to see where the space is before they come to university. So basically you climb into this capsule and you shut out all the sensory stimuli. We also have escape hatches around the campus. So really it's just about recognizing that the campus is chaotic, loud, busy, and making, you can call them safe spaces or quiet spaces, available. Some of them have cost money, but others haven't. We've just used a room that's available. They would be the main sensory things, and with any adjustment that we've made, what we have found is that there's a high percentage of people using them, not just autistic people. So there's people just find noise kind of difficult and to reset, so they'll use the spaces. But it's really important always to promote these spaces ahead of the event.
Yeah, that's great. I'm actually thinking about my first week in university and how overwhelmed I was.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine if you're suffering from, or if you have rather, ASD, how difficult it must be to be in that kind of environment. I think college students are particularly loud, aren't they?
Yeah.
And universities are kind of designed to just bounce sound around the place as well. So yeah, wow. You mentioned that people with ASD have difficulties or communicate in a different way. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it might affect their day-to-day life, whether it's in work or college or in a community environment?
Yeah, so it has quite a large ranging impact, and obviously it's different for every single individual, but suppose some of the common communication differences would be autistic people could tend to take things more literally. So again, it's just having an awareness that slang may not be understood or just kind of subtle. So might tend to be more black and white thinkers and struggle with grey kind of wishy-washy language, like not really meaning what you say. And on the flip side of that, they may communicate very literally, but that can come across sometimes as being blunt or possibly being rude. But it's not that. It's just that the person communicates in a very literal, simple, clear cut way, not dressing up a sentence to make it, I suppose, to walk on eggshells, so to speak. And even like that expression there, if I said that to maybe an 8-year-old who's on the autistic spectrum, oh, I'm walking on eggshells, that 8-year-old is literally going to think that I have eggshells on the floor and I'm walking on them. So as you get older, you do begin to, I suppose, have a little bit more awareness of, hang on, she said, get a grip, or pull up, you know, or walking in eggshells, but that couldn't be what she means. So you might kind of recalibrate. But for younger people on the spectrum, they haven't built up that dictionary in their head yet of walking on eggshells doesn't mean that, but this is what it does mean. Also, they might tend to need a lot of detail, so very detailed thinking. So they might deliver their communication quite detailed, or write an essay like very, very detailed, and lose marks because they've just given so much detail on one point, but haven't kind of given around it a bigger picture view. So literal thinking, detailed communication, and a need for detail. So instead of saying need to talk to you later, that might really worry the person. So it would be, I need to talk to you later about your essay or about what happened today. So it's very much about meaning what you say and saying what you mean. But there's definitely a place for natural thinkers, because they can cut through a lot of waffle and come to really quick decisions in emergencies. Like when if it's an emergency and a quick decision is needed, it's definitely a literal thinker that you want on your team or on a pub quiz, because they will just see through all the peripheral information and get straight into the actual, I suppose, nub of it. But also communication can be difficult because of the sensory environment. So if you've a kid in school and they're hearing noise coming out of the light, or they might be hearing a squeak coming from a student's shoe. So they're not just hearing a squeak or not noise coming from the light. Possibly it's like a train track running through their head. I know students who would in a lecture hall and they can hear the currents running through a toaster in the kitchen of a kind of a staff room next to the lecture hall, hearing these currents running through their head. So it's hard to communicate when you're smelling something from like way back in the hall, or you're hearing somebody chewing gum or tapping their foot, or there's noise coming from the light. So that also has an impact on communication.
I suppose that kind of got me thinking, do you think that COVID and studying remotely was a positive for some students, or do you think the blended learning kind of, I suppose, is better for people on the ASD spectrum, or sorry, who have ASD?
Yeah.
What were the
definitely
kind of
yeah, the feedback be blended because of what we've spoken about the sensory environment. So quite often by the time a student gets onto campus, their sensory bucket is already quite full, because they've had to walk through crowds, they've had to get a bus, they've had to cycle. And a lot of students and staff who are on the autistic spectrum would describe being in school or a busy environment as being in warrior mode all day. So their system goes into fight, because they're just so nervous and anxious, like wondering what noise is going to come at them, or what smell, or is someone going to tap them on the shoulder. So they're in fight mode. So concentrate on lessons, and that's why we need quiet spaces for them to go and reset. So by being able to stay at home and have that option to watch the lecture when you're feeling better, like, or when your sensory system is good, and not have to deal with the crowds on a camp or commuting and getting there. The flip side of that would be some students who are naturally introverted would have said that they became super introverted during COVID. So now they are really struggling to come back into society, struggling because they were naturally shy and introverted anyway. and they got used to their own bedroom, they got used to their own structure, but also they're really struggling coming back to a very chaotic sensory environment. So in that case, definitely blended would have been the answer, because you want to keep up skills with, you know, with socializing and using public transport, going into shops, so that your bedroom doesn't become your kingdom, so to speak. But yeah, really good question. Definitely learning was better online.
Okay, yeah. And is the university then going to keep up that blended approach for some students? Is that an option, or?
Hopefully they are coming up with a policy at the moment. So yeah, there is lots of conversation around what percentage would be online, what would be on campus, and how do you blend the two. So you could be online for 2 hours, but then you need to be on campus. So there's lots of things to but even I suppose if lectures could be recorded, that means that if the student feels they need to leave halfway through, that they just can't function. And it's not just a tiredness, it's because there is something in the background that is running through their head and making them feel physically sick, that they would need to leave the lecture, so if it was available to watch later when they've and decompressed, I guess.
Okay, yeah, that's great. It's good to have that kind of support in place. I suppose you mentioned the fact that people with ASD tend to be quite detail oriented, which is something that I'm super jealous of because I'm not. What are some other advantages of being on the autism spectrum? What other kind of skills or superpowers do people have, or what kind of skills or traits do they bring to like learning, work, community environments? Yeah.
So I think there is like there's myths with everything, and that there are certainly myths out there that autistic people are great mathematicians and great at programming and computer science. Yeah, some are, but some are also teachers, amazing nurses, really creative musicians. I think really what counts, I think if you look at people like Greta Thunberg, she had lots of different challenges growing up, and as soon as she discovered climate change, that became her special interest. So she fully focused on it, gave it 100%. And I think that's what you will find with many autistic people, that if that motivator or hook is provided, that they will go above and beyond. So they would be finishers. So they would see something through from the beginning to the middle to the end. And quite often perfectionists, so will spot minor details, will want them fixed. But I think the main thing is kind of their commitment to a subject or passion. I think kind of unrivaled. I've seen it in so many students, like if they're doing final year projects, they just excel if they're interested in it. If they're not interested, then that can be quite difficult, because they might focus on a tiny part of it that they're interested in, and that they would get 101%, but leave other parts. So definitely yeah, detail, able to spot errors, quite a unique sense of fairness, and loyalty, and I think commitment and passion, objects or like things in society or the world that are unequal. So very passionate, I think, about fairness and inequality.
Wow, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know Greta Thunberg had ASD herself or was on the spectrum. Yeah, that's really interesting. It makes sense. Yeah, that kind of like focus and drive. And it must be, yeah, like you said, very useful, I suppose, if you're in an academic environment and you have like a long form project, like a thesis, and you're like really passionate about it. Whereas I think a lot of people would just lose interest very quickly or kind of half arse it. Apologies for the language, but you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I would describe like finishers just will see it right through. And also I suppose we would get a lot of companies contacting DCU, specifically looking for they will use the expression detailed thinkers. So straight away it's you know, who's on the autistic spectrum. Now there's lots of people not on the autistic spectrum who are detailed thinkers as well, but it definitely is being able to be detailed.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I suppose obviously Suman and Sharna from our community are from our CHI members, and how can we, you know, as members of a community, make people with ASD feel more included or include them in our community setting? Do you have any tips or advice for that?
So, well, like what you're doing this evening is really good. I think if autistic people know that whoever it is organising events of that has some awareness of autism and like what the sensory environment, what a barrier might be. So I suppose main things would be like straight off, if you wanted to start doing something in the morning, it would be to re-look at how you communicate events. Is the communication clear? When the person gets to the venue, is what going to happen clear? So really what you're doing is you're making it very easy to follow and low anxiety, producing, I suppose, for everyone, but particularly for people who are autistic and tend to be a little bit more anxious about attending events. If you know the event is going to be very loud or chaotic, like you could include a little one-liner in, you know, contact us if you, like you often see it with events, it's contact us if you have any accessibility issues or dietary. But I think the word accessibility, people will more think of a physical access. Dietary, a lot of autistic people have gut issues, so they will let you know that. But if you also added in like sensory requests, that might be something, clearer language, because I know a lot of people on the spectrum might then feel more confident about attending and might ask, you know, is there any little quiet space, or where exactly will I be sitting? Could you send me a photograph of it? Because if the person has a photograph ahead, they can visualize the event ahead, because a lot of the time, even if you've been to the same venue 3 times, it tends to be like entering it new every time. So you're wondering, like, where is the door, where's the light? You're looking out for possible sensory attack. So if you know ahead of time, if I sit there, I'm not near a light, or I'm not near the speaker, and I'm near to the door. So yeah, just simple. I would start off with the environment and clear communication. And really it's about asking the person, like, let us know if you have any sensory requests. Autistic people get the word sensory requests, and they will let you know.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I'd never thought about that. That's really, really useful for us, and I think useful for the workplace as well.
Yeah,
I suppose that would be another question then. How can you kind of include people on the spectrum or make them feel more comfortable in the workplace? Do you have any additional kind of tips or?
I think what the main thing is to environment where somebody on the spectrum feels that they can talk to somebody if there is. Have I dropped? Sorry, Anthony.
Oh, dropped for a
Will I start
second and then
again?
you're back.
Okay. So I think for autistic people that I've spoken to within DCU, what would help and what has helped is just a conversation, like an awareness that there are neurodiverse people within our organization. Please contact us if you want. Many people don't want to disclose. They don't need to say, hey, I'm on the autistic spectrum, but they might need to say, hey, open space doesn't work for me, or is it okay if I attend an interview not wearing a suit and tie because I have sensory issues? So I would just start off with some type of awareness, not campaign, but putting it out there, that we're not trained, but we have autism awareness. We're on this journey of becoming more aware of our neurodiverse work team. If there's any requests or any questions on, we might adjust your workplace to create your conditions for success, let us know. You kind of need to put it out there to the autistic community, because they will know what is not working for them in their working environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And quite often it's very small adjustments.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, just kind of opening that space. That makes a lot of sense. Even just having like a suggestion kind of box or something like that might work.
Yeah.
Great. I'm just having a look. Well, this is just, sorry, a question out of my own curiosity. You mentioned a documentary that you're screening at the end of the month for well, it was International Autism Awareness Day the other day, and you're going to be running a few events. What was the name of the documentary? See the Unseen.
Yeah, it's called Seeing the Unseen, and it was made in Iceland, and I think it shows it interviews 17 women who are on the autistic spectrum. So why they have made this documentary is because as more, I guess as more children are getting diagnosed, autism diagnosis, sometimes the mother or the father or the guardian might kind of see things in their child and think, I kind of think that as well. So there's a lot more parents getting a diagnosis now. And I think what has been found is women are very good at masking neurotypical behavior, so that they can mask, they're better at pretending and fitting in, because kind of a little bit better at studying human behavior, but that comes at a personal cost, and that would be why there are less women and girls diagnosed as autistic. It's not because there is less, it's because they have been hiding their difference, whether it's communication or not stimming. They've been hiding it more to fit in. So I suppose it's quite a current subject at the moment, that society used to believe that, it's mainly boys, but it's not. It's just mainly boys who are getting diagnosed. What you find is probably, after secondary school, an autistic girl may struggle because there's such a massive change after leaving secondary school. Even the way education is run in secondary as opposed to university, they might have lost their 2 or 3 good girlfriends who they knew well, and who they kind of, I suppose, in a way, copied their behaviors. So yeah, it's called Seeing the Unseen, but it's a very big subject at the moment within the autistic community.
Sorry, you dropped for a second. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Actually,
I
have a friend who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 26, and she's kind of, super hyper focused, very creative. She's an artist, but I was surprised, and it's I suppose, I don't know. No, never mind. I was going to say something, and then I was like, I lost my train of thought.
No, there's there's a lot of autistic women, like over 40, 50, just getting diagnoses now. And quite often, there might be confusion in the beginning, but quite often it's very much a sense of, okay, that's what that was about, and kind of finding their place in the world after the diagnosis, and not being so hard on themselves for for things that they might have just thought, why is everyone coping with that environment, or class, or staying in the same job? So yeah, it can be very positive.
Yeah, once you kind of know what you're dealing with, you can kind of find the support. Yeah,
exactly,
for sure.
the tools.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose you were talking about, so you're going to screen the film. Are there any other events that you're going to have for autism awareness? And I'm just curious to know, just in order for like future community events, what the setup might be in order to make them a little bit more suitable for people.
I think what we have found is online has worked.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you can send out a recording after. So the Neurodivergent Society in DCU, they used to hold like afternoon tea and board games, quiz nights on campus. So like a simple adjustment to that was they're now doing all of that online as well. So online board games, online quizzes. There's if you check out actually just for the month of April, as IE, they're having lots of events over the month, and then we're having our events the end of April, the 25th. But there's lots happening in this month, and all those events, the events are on Facebook. So if you were considering events, yeah, just check them out and see how they're being run.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much. I suppose my last question for you before we move to asking the attendees if they have any questions for you is where can we go for more information? You mentioned As I Am. Would they be a good resource? Are there any other resources that you'd really recommend for people wanting to learn more?
I would start looking at, I would be on social media following autistic people, so that there's so many. Actually, autistic is really good. Thriving Autistic is good. I won't go into naming them, but the best resource is from autistic children, teenagers, adults, grandparents themselves. There's actually a good film, The Reason I Jump, that's written by a young autistic boy. There's really good books. Derek McNulty has written a really good book on being autistic and nature. The best source is from autistic people, and they're luckily enough their voice is becoming very very, I suppose, well heard now in society, because a lot of these teenagers have grown up and are now more in a place to talk about, you know, what worked for me in school, what didn't work, wish my teacher might have known.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't know if you dropped or.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I'm going in and out of dropping.
No,
and I think you can probably hear my dog bark as well. Yeah, there's so many. There's too many to. I don't want to name it, but there's so many on autistic people on social media. Like there's poets, there's artists, there's singers, there's lecturers, there's doctors. There's so many.
Yeah, and that's great. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And even to open the floor with somebody, you know, if you think that they'd be open to it, would you recommend that as well? Maybe talking.
Oh, definitely. I think the more of a platform that you give to autistic people to talk about their experiences, their lived experience, the better. Like we would all, our go-to would always be to look for a student or somebody who has that experience behind them. Now, obviously, every autistic person's experience can be very different.
Of course.
But yeah, you're better off going directly to the source.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Fiona.
No problem.
Thanks, Mel. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know if Anthony, Christine, Suman, Sharon.
I've got 101 different questions, and then Sharon has also popped up a question there. First of all, Fiona, thank you so much. You've given really positive feedback and positive information. My first question to you hopefully will be informative, but as Michaela has asked, what should we do when we're working in the community and hoping to encourage people who are autistic to engage in different activities and events? The question is, what shouldn't we do? What are like the top things that we should definitely not do? So maybe start off with that question and then we'll move
yeah.
on.
I don't think I have 10 things, but I guess the first would be to include, like, if you're thinking of something, if at all possible, like I would be starting off trying to form a little network, you know, maybe 1 or 2 parents or children who are on the autistic spectrum, or maybe seeking a diagnosis. So, and they would be, so to speak, sounding board. So what I've just said there is very abstract language, so you wouldn't use those words, sounding board, but a go-to, like, information points. I think that's your starting point, and if you start with the right people in, you know, when you're planning an event, that if you make sure that, you know, if you're calling an event diverse, well, you need to check and see, is the promotion of it diverse? Is the language clear? What are the images like? Who was involved in the planning? And it doesn't mean that you need a whole team and 100 meetings, but just that you have consulted a diverse range of people. So the same way you might consult a wheelchair user into, will this venue be suitable? You might also then think of consulting somebody on the autistic spectrum, or somebody with a sensory processing disorder, to maybe do a quick check of the building before, or just to talk through about the venue and what might help. You're not going to be able to make it accessible to everyone, I guess, but it's just seeing what you can do for the most people. So I think, Anthony, without going into 100 things not to do, the one thing that what you won't do is you don't plan and assume on behalf of people, I guess, who have a different way of thinking and processing information than you do. So it's just really trying to get some more advice from people with a lived experience of that. And communication, it's a given that it should be clear all the time, but it's not. There's reams of words and sentences that don't need to be used.
Yeah, I'm awful for creating jargony, fluffy language, and I need to train myself not to include that as much. The question that has come from Sharon, which is directly a third level education question, is access routes to third level regarding Irish exemptions. So if a person doesn't have an Irish exemption, but has an ASD or autism diagnosis, are they able to still apply for DCU? I think it's just the language, the second language piece.
Yeah, do you know, I'm not going to answer that specifically because it's not my area and I don't want to give misleading information, but I can contact Suman after, and definitely, or who asked the question? Sharon, and put you in touch with somebody in DCU who can answer that question factually and correctly, because I'm only guessing the pathway to that, but I can definitely put you in touch with the relevant person.
And the second question is to Sharon as well, and it's around pathways. And I think getting in touch with the right person at the right time is perfect. If Sharon is okay with this, and I'll contact Sharon afterwards, I'll pass Sharon's email over to you, or give Sharon your email if that's okay.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, and we'll keep in touch then.
Brilliant.
You're welcome, Sharon.
Is there anybody else who has any other questions, or will I just keep on going? Suman, have you got a question?
Yeah, good evening, Anthony. How are you doing?
Not
Hi.
too bad. Thank you for coming.
Good. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate, man. I would like to say, like, I have my son. He's 7, and he got a diagnosed ASD.
Yeah.
And I have been 7 years been living with autisms, and it's not enough. Like government and state, the coordinated to approach when it's coming to the autisms, and the believing in autisms like my son is like a last 5 or 6 years he haven't any speech and language service from government, and the part of the like your assessment on the workshop or kind of any kind of the treatment is very very lack of the government, any other charity or any other private organizations. So I would like to serve community for society or any other organization as I am, or any, especially for Fiona. So how really to proactive or kind of like initiative to government or any other community or the people or whose society living in there, that we could help them, because there's the part of the big difference, we are as a normal human, we're not living in their life, but we need a more experienced, more qualified to helping them to what they're looking for. So it's a really, really struggle. And a part that in the last 2 years, the COVID is really, really, it just really impact on their full their development and everything, mental and physically. And top on them, the parents who have them, the autistic children, they are mentally stressed and their level traumatized, So yeah, Fiona, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, no, sorry, I thought you were finished, Suman. Do you want to continue talking, or will I talk?
No, go ahead. Yeah, because it's not going to finish, because I just, I'm missing all the information, all the lack of things, I really appreciate for Antonia and Michaela for this, give me this opportunity, honestly.
Yeah, and again, after this, if you to exchange emails, we can keep in touch. I know during COVID, because I probably can't answer or do anything high level like that, but I know what you're saying. It's very out there on the online community, and I know certainly that but parents would say that the children's language has regressed over the last 2 years during COVID, which is really, really poor because it's so important.
Yeah, every part you're challenging and difficult is like, my child is like his lack of the speech and language, his early intervention team is not any help, or top on them his occupational therapy, sensory things, there's not enough to kind of tools from the materials got from the school because the lack of teachers, and that you're in the struggle to begging them to any kind of request. HSE, the government, or just they are really really just just nightmare, honestly, at the moment.
I think at the moment it's definitely as I am who are leading the space in that. I suppose they're acting in between parents and government at the moment. So again, they have a very strong online presence, but I think it's probably best if we exchange emails, if that's so after. And I'm not sure if I can answer any more or do anything, but I'll certainly keep in touch with you tomorrow or the next day and just get a better feeling of the situation.
I will indeed. Thanks very much, honestly.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I'm just turning my light on. I've gone into the dark. Hi.
The light is back on. You've shone a light on us
Big
this
lights, yeah.
evening. With all the lingo and jargon, I'm still doing it. I
do it all the time, but I think what I have kind of just done a bit more now is I will explain afterwards. You know, if I say to a student or somebody, pull up your socks, it will suddenly dawn on me, and I'll say, what I mean is we need to improve here. It's just using clear language and not being afraid to be direct and clear. Neurotypical people are quite, I think, have a fear of being blunt, and it's what people who think literally want and need. They want clear language and clear rules.
I think there's something about, not to generalize too much, like Irish culture in general is so indirect, and the way that we address people is so indirect that sometimes, I'd say it's quite a pain. We just like scooting around the truth. We are
nervous, Michelina. We are afraid to ask some, freedom or rights. This is the most things.
Yeah. And quite often literal thinkers, or they will simply just say it as it is, and everyone else is looking around on a bit, but it's great freedom in it, I guess, if that's your style of communication.
Absolutely.
Fiona, I nearly forgot your name. I worked with you. Apologies, just went on a blank.
It's on the screen.
Fiona, all I can say is thank you so much. We started, or we intended to start at 6:30 this evening, and to run on to 7:30, which it's just 2 minutes to 7:30. It's been so informative, this conversation. We could nearly create a toolkit of an awareness from just this conversation alone. You're a fountain of knowledge, and you're right. We need to create a network, even if it is just a sharing group from the different communities that we're working with. It's got my brain trucking along for the next steps of what we're going to be working on. I'm sure Suman and Sharon are going to be definitely in touch with you.
Yeah, great.
Brilliant, Anthony. Thanks, man.
Good.
I appreciate it, and I'll certainly be in touch with you fairly shortly, Fiona. Thank you very much for this evening. Michaela, you worked wonders.
Thank you, Michaela.
Thanks very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure, and I'm happy to have done it, and to be available again if there's any follow-up from anyone else who watches it, or if any questions spring to mind. So it's not an end. It's a new connection. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Fiona.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Anthony. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks. Bye. 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 Bye.